So whoever watches can watch.
Now they're charging me $10 for a provisional hold. What is this?
Maybe you should order for somewhere else.
Who are you ordering from?
From Carter's. They're giving, okay, if I take off the salad stuff and I just buy that later, they have me at a $5 pickup fee and a $10 provisional hold fee. So I guess it's a hold, like they're going to give me that $10 back? That's what it sounds like.
Card, yeah, make sure you have enough to cover it.
Yeah.
So you pay to pick up your food?
Yes. That's what I said.
Are you using the Carters in Walker?
Yeah.
Mine and Denham don't get. I'm going into this train to me this day. I'm getting on my account.
Yeah, $5 pickup. I've never seen that online.
Domino's gives you $3 to pick up your pizza.
Yeah. You
Oh.
find out why they're charging you when you pick it up. Why are you charging me $5 for me to pick up my own food?
Literally by the backbone I would.
You want me to go ask them?
That's amazing to
She'll be
me.
like,
Someone's gonna pick
Their
up
deli
stuff
is horrible.
for
I'm
me.
gonna tell you right now. I will even from my job. I drive to Denham to not deal with that one. And
Really?
I even called the Canes and told him, "Do you know what kind of service that store is doing?" And he didn't. I said, "Cause I'm not gonna get him Ellis business. You know I'm going on with Denham."
Oh, wow.
I said, because I went in one time to get chicken and she told me, "I'm not gonna fry you chicken today. Sorry."
Oh, Lord.
And
Yeah.
I went. So I got on the phone and said, "Do you know your deli said I'm not gonna fry this chicken today?"
Wow.
The kitchen ladies one time tell us that they didn't want to give us cereal. The kids had that open box cereal, and we bring our preschoolers in late after everybody's in class, and that's when Eddie brings us. And we came in there, and we were looking as we passed by the kids, and so all of our kids was like, cereal, cereal, and, they were so excited, and so we went in the line, and she said, and we were like, well, what happened to the cereal? And they said, well, she's going to get free because she doesn't want to have to open another box of cereal. And my teacher went, no ma'am. She went to the
Straight to the
office.
principal. Yep.
And the principal was Bonnie Cox at the time.
Wow.
And her son was in her class. She walked up in there.
Not the place to say no cereal.
Shelbo, if you want to do it with Walmart, you can. I was just trying to shop local.
no, I hear you. I've found what the provisional hold is. We temporarily authorize your card for the hire of $10 or 50% of the item total if it helps account for charges like bottle deposit, final sales tax, and items sold by weight. As soon as your order is complete, we charge your card for exactly what was in your final order.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, let's get to our study.
What chapter are we on now?
We're on chapter 28, and we ended last week with Esau trying to figure out how to please his mom and daddy. And so he married one of Ishmael's daughters, hoping that was going to do the job, but really it doesn't.
Made their life miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a long talk about daughter-in-laws and all that. So we're back with Jacob, and I think we don't run into Esau again until the Jabbok River incident. So this is a story now, a rather protracted account of Jacob and what's in store for him. Right now, he's on the run. And rightfully so. He's deceived and he's stolen. He's done everything possible to alienate himself from his family. Now, the other thing about that, God said that he would be the one that would be served. But while he's talking to his mother about all of that, she never says that he has to be a deceiver in order to do it. He creates that world on his own, and she helps. So, verse 10 tells us, Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. So that's where Abraham's family was from, and we're still there after all these decades of time. He reached a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. He took one of the stones from that place, put it there at his head, and lay down in that place. Now, to me, it's an interesting little addition to the story. That it doesn't say that he places it under his head, as some of the old Sunday school pictures when we were children used to show that. But he puts it there by his head.
Mine says under his head.
Yeah, it's not under though. I looked and I looked, but I don't guess it matters.
He still took a stone.
Yeah. So he put it there and he laid it down, and then he dreamed. And there's a semicolon past dream, so we're going to get a description of the dream. A stairway was set up on the ground with its top reaching the sky, and God's angels were going up and down on it. The Lord was standing there beside him, saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your offspring the land on which you are lying. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out toward the west, the east, the north, and the south. All the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised to you. So it's very, very similar to the original declaration that God gave Abraham, right? So this is kind of the official passing of the promise event that occurs here. And it comes in a dream. And God is standing there with him. So this is even more intimate than we've seen with Abraham at the time that the promise is moved forward. He never does scold Jacob for any of the things that he's done. It's not even in God's. It's not in his program at all to do that. It just you are who you are, and some of that I'll be able to use, and some of it I won't. But he doesn't scold him for being who he is. He just says that you're going to be the one to carry the promise. So it's a singular thing that God is accomplishing at this moment in Jacob's life. So it says, when Jacob woke from his sleep, he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that was near his head, and he set it up as a marker. He poured oil on top of it, and he named the place Bethel, though previously the city was named Luz. Then Jacob made a vow. All right, well, let's just stop there for a minute. So it says that he stopped at a certain place. We learned that this place is called Luz, but now it's been renamed. So whenever the significance of that is whenever God renames someone, it means that there's been a significant change in their life. And anybody really that does that, I always think of Cantor Freedom, where he changed his name to Freedom when he became a U.S. citizen. He was a Turkish citizen, but he loves his freedom so much, he just changed his name to Freedom. So every time he says his name, it's a declaration of what he values. And so this is kind of the same thing. Jacob values this place on the ground because surely this is the house of God that he's kind of stumbled across, and God has met him there. So he took the stone and he named the place Bethel. Then Jacob made a vow. If God will be with me and watch over me during this journey I'm making, if he provides me with food to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safely to my father's family, then the Lord will be my God. The stone that I have set up as a marker will be God's house, and I will give to you a tenth of all that you give to me. All right, so a lot of ifs there. Sound like a bargain? Yeah. Sound like he's bargaining, doesn't it? Yeah. So he's kind of placed this onus upon God. If you do these three things, then you'll be my God, and I'll give you a tenth of everything you give me. So what does God gain in this deal?
Well, he's already promised all the way. I mean, it's like.
It's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
He's already promised everything. And so here's a, I mean, we look at this, and on the surface, it's like this. Jacob's got to be in control. He can't help it. He's got to be the one calling the shots. But all the while, we know in the background, as does Jacob, that this deal's set in stone. God's already said who he is to Jacob, and that's not going to change. And we see that it doesn't change. But it does teach us a lesson, because too often we either consciously or subconsciously are making deals with God that we want this peace brought to our life. Please, Lord, just get my parents settled and I'll do whatever you want. Or any number of things that we whisper under our breath to God, just wanting to get some sort of predetermined response, predetermined result that'll work for us. And that's some of what he's doing here. He's out in the middle of nowhere. And he's saying, okay, well, if he watch over me, provides me food, gives me clothing to wear, yeah, I guess I will be his servant, because otherwise I'll be dead. You know, that's the other way to look at it, is if he takes care of me, I will be able to do all of this. But if he chooses not to take care of me, I'm as good as a goner. So there's two ways to look at it, but I still think it's in Jacob's nature at this point to be able to even negotiate with God, and we see it again later. So we're given kind of a foreshadowing into the way this is going to go for Jacob. And we also are given a kind of a foreshadowing look into how God deals with this. This is the guy that I've chosen. He's going to be the guy to carry my program forward, and I'm not changing my mind.
Hopefully it gives hope to us who have children who are only able to make deals with the Lord.
Yeah.
Chase would be my Jacob. If then, Lord, if then.
Right. All right.
Like, it doesn't work that way, child. You know, you can't just put a quarter in a slot machine and say, okay, God, let's see where we go. You know,
Yeah.
so
It
you
don't,
realize he's not, it's things gotta be just his way. You know, he's my control for it.
right.
So
Yeah.
is this one stone really considered some kind of altar?
Well, yes, it says, let's see. He took the stone that was near his head and set it up as a marker. And let's see.
That's now the Bethel. That's the marker for the Bethel.
Yes.
But why a stone to sleep on? I mean, to me, that's give you a headache and what made it.
Yeah. That's why the interpretation that's always been under is kind of shifted its way toward at.
Could it have been like a defense thing? Like, so you had something right there in case something came up on you?
I don't know.
Well, I hadn't
When
thought
you-
about that, but that's trying to
That's
throw a
true.
rock at it.
Yeah.
A really big one.
When you set up a stone as an altar, you got to have more than one. So he sets up this stone, and you could guess that it's the foundation stone and other stones. It really doesn't let us know, but it was significant enough to pour oil, which is anointing it.
Yeah, the fact that
And
it's
setting it
mentioned-
apart.
It's mentioned and it is a place
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I understood.
Yeah.
I understood but I'm thinking, you place that one thing out there, you pour oil on it, you leave, and then somebody comes by 2 weeks later. Oh, this looks like a good stone for me to take and put on my fireplace. I mean, how are they
Well,
marking that as a?
Yeah.
You
So
know?
it's got to be more than the one. And the anointing, it may be something God protects. I don't know, but it's significant enough to where he can come back to it, and so can anyone that he tells about it. Yeah, yeah. And the important thing, I think, in the story, in the account, I don't want to call them stories; they're accounts. Yeah. The important part of it is that he recognized what was happening in his life, and it was significant. And he wanted to make sure that he did not lose this place on the earth. So, yeah, so we talk about geography and genealogy. It's just laced all in here. Where the two are joined together, you really have a difficulty separating the two. They are not separated until the cross, where the genealogy becomes Christ's genealogy, and the geography is no longer ground, but it's the human heart. And Jeremiah gives us a glimpse into what all this is going to mean many, many, many hundreds of years later.
For some people, still genealogy and ground still matters.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
When God shows up somewhere, even now, they want to mark it and go here.
Absolutely.
So it's not still happening, but God's doing this here, God's done that there.
Yeah. But scripturally,
It's not necessary.
right. And by the time you get to the New Testament, really the significant place is the temple. And it's been under constant attack and repair for hundreds of years. And it's not what you expect to be, the house of God. I mean, when you think about it, they stood in awe of the temple, and Herod had built it. It always never set right with me that Herod's temple was thought of so highly, and he was such a ruthless, terrible person. But he had built it because he needed favor with Rome and favor with the people.
And it was, for its time, it was majestic.
Oh yeah, it was.
It makes the dome over there now when you. That's supposedly the Muslims claim that big dome of rock.
Yeah.
When you go, it's a sight to behold, but it was like a temple.
Oh,
the original temple.
yeah.
It's like, this is
Yeah, when it's described, it's like, I mean, really, it's just like Solomon. I mean, it was amazing that what was there. And when Jesus came and said, "Yeah, I'll tear it down. I'll build it back in 3 days." Yeah, I mean, just hearing that come out of his mouth, that really. All right, so Jacob resumed his journey, and he went to the eastern country. So we're headed up toward Haran, which is the Fertile Crescent in Iraq, present-day Iraq. He looked and saw a well in a field. So perk your ears up, people. We're at a well now. Yeah. 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it because the sheep were watered from the well. So they were laying there. They had gotten their fill and were just chilling out. But a large stone covered the opening of the well. The shepherds would roll the stone from the opening of the well and water the sheep when all the flocks were gathered there. Then they would return the stone to its place over the well's opening. So here we have another group of control freaks. Okay, they weren't sharing their water. They were only letting water be used when they were around. Okay. So symbolically, they were in control of the life that was available there. Then they would return the stone over the well's opening. Jacob asked the men at the well, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they answered. "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" Jacob asked them, and they answered, "We know him." "Is he well?" Jacob asked. "Yes," they said. "And here is his daughter Rachel coming with the sheep." Then Jacob said, "Look, it is still broad daylight. It's not time for the animals to be gathered. Water the flock, then go out and let them graze." Okay. But they replied, "We can't until all the flocks have been gathered and the stone is rolled from the well's opening. Then we will water the sheep." So here they are. They're saying, "We do this one time a day, dude. We don't just bring them in here and water them whenever we want. We got to have all the sheep together. We water them and then we close it back up." So while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. As soon as Jacob saw his uncle Laban's daughter Rachel with his sheep, he went up and rolled the stone from the opening and watered his uncle Laban's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept loudly. He told Rachel that he was her father's relative, Rebekah's son. She ran and told her father. So man, this story is just full of stuff, man. It's just full of all this thing. He's the life that's in the water is bottled up, and here comes Jacob. He rolls the stone back. He's able to release the water and water not only her sheep, but her father Laban's sheep, and it's like love at first sight. And she runs off. So this is not the only time we will experience this idea of being at a well. These 2 people meet. love is in the air, and then excitement incurs, and they run and go tell the rest of the people. So it's a pattern that exists, and it's supposed to direct us back to previous events along the way and allow us to see how God is working through these particular events around wells, so that we know that out of the excitement that is occurring, that something good is coming out of this. There's going to be other well events that happen in 1 Samuel and another one, and I forget which Kings that it's in. And it happens at the well, but there's no excitement. And lo and behold, it turns out not to be good. So all the elements come into place to help us guide to these different events and interpret them. So when Laban heard the news about his sister's son Jacob, he ran to meet him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then he took him into his house, and Jacob told him all that had happened. Laban said to him, "Yes, you are my own flesh and blood. If you did that to your brother, you got to be a relative of mine, dude." So after Jacob had stayed with him a month, Laban said to him, "Just because you're my relative, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." So Jacob's been there, and he's a herdsman, and so he's just been kind of hanging out and helping around the house, working for his room and board, I guess. And now Laban's offering to pay him. So now Laban had 2 daughters. The older was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. Leah had tender eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel. So he said to Laban, I will work for you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Okay, here we are. It's not just the sons, the younger sons that are being chosen over the older. Now we have the younger daughter being chosen over the older. So this is a constant theme for God, where he wants more than anything to bring about a change in the way that people think about the destinies of their life, that he can work through and push through any cultural norms that may have existed or any expectations of older over younger, and begin to look to him. So he says, I work for 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. It's a long time. 7 years. A complete amount of time. So Laban replied, better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay with me. So Jacob, yeah, I guess you'll do for my younger. So Jacob loved, let's see. So Laban replied, so Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel. And it seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. So, boy, love is in the air. Wonderful. You know. Now this has become sort of his dowry inheritance, a double inheritance from his family. He's already received from his father. This is his mother's side. And he's willing to work to get what he wants from the mother's family. All right? And so the description of the love here is to lead us into knowing that Jacob he's head over heels in love. There's no way it's not weakening, it's not going anywhere. So then Jacob said to Laban, since my time is complete, give me my wife so I can sleep with her. It's like that's all I've thought about for 7 years. But that's what he's wanting to do. All right, this is the fertility thing going on here already. They met at the well. Now the love is strong, and now they're ready to be fertile together. So Laban invited all the men of the place and sponsored a feast. That evening, Laban took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and he slept with her. And Laban gave his slave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her slave. Wait a minute, is that the right one? Huh?
Nope.
No. When morning.
The deceiver is being deceived.
Yeah.
What goes around comes around.
Yep. When morning came, there was Leah. So he said to Laban, "What have you done to me? Wasn't it for Rachel that I worked for you? Why have you deceived me?" Oh, so now it's all flipped around on him. Okay, and the thing that has, what has been violated worse than anything here? Okay, his love for Rachel and Leah. Okay, Leah's a pawn in her father's hand, and Jacob's love has been violated by this whole thing. But yet here it is. The marriage was done, the ceremony was complete, much like the whole birthright thing, and now it can't be undone because you've consummated this relationship. To try to undo it is impossible. In these days, it was actually impossible. It just didn't make any sense at all to do such a thing. So, what have you done for me? Laban answered, "It is not the custom in my country to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn." Had 7 years to tell him this.
He was deceiving him.
He could have been out looking for somebody to marry Leah. You know, yeah, he could have handled this a lot differently. If I've got to find somebody to marry Leah before I get her, I'll go do it. I'll find somebody. It's just, it's not their custom.
He had a bigger plan.
Yeah.
You ain't going anywhere, Jacob.
So he says, "Complete this week of wedding celebration, and we will give you this younger one in return for working yet another 7 years for me." What a scoundrel, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah. So he's got to go through this whole week of wedding celebration with his lip stuck out because he's been deceived. Okay, so it wasn't going to be any real celebration. It was strictly, that's just what they were calling it. It was the tradition. So tradition, got him into this, and tradition has got him living this week where he's, it's not going to be a very good week. But the whole thing, Jacob should be in the back of his mind thinking, "Yeah, I do deserve this." He immediately thought of Esau and all of that business, I would think. Maybe not. But in order for God to accomplish what he's going to accomplish here, in order for the younger to be the favored one, it's going to require some pain and sacrifice of the one carrying the promise. So we find that all the way through already with Abraham and Isaac. They've had to learn some hard lessons along the way in order to retain the promise. So there's character building that's going on along here, and this is part of that character building for Jacob. So God starts this thing in a person, and it doesn't mean that you're ready for it. It doesn't mean that you're qualified for it. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means that God has chosen you, and he's going to accomplish his program in you. So get ready. And that's some of what this is. So he said, Jacob did just that. He finished the week of celebration, and Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. And Laban gave his slave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her slave. So Jacob slept with Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. So it's not like he waited 7 years to get Rachel.
Yeah.
I
They
get him
were to
right away.
Week,
Yeah.
had to stay 7 years.
That's right. So he stayed 7 years, and he did it. And I wonder if that one felt like a few days. He got 2 wives in his home. It may have felt like a couple of weeks or a month or 2.
So, at this point in time, God really hasn't said a whole lot about having more than one wife
No.
at this point.
No.
Okay.
The one wife thing is a it comes about really nowhere in particular, except when we get to the 10, and he says, "You shall not commit adultery." But then having 2 wives wasn't always considered adultery.
Yeah.
And you can dig through, and it'll
But there
really.
was always only one that God would honor and recognize.
That's
no matter
right.
How many they had.
That's
the
right.
One does matter, you know.
That's
It's
right.
always just the one.
So there was
But
this.
where that one, I think, when God said, "Do not commit adultery," the one
Yeah.
does matter.
Well, there's a matriarchal system that runs with the patriarchal system. So we saw that with Sarah. There was no replacing Sarah, okay? And of course, there wasn't a problem with Rebecca. And then here, what we find is that the sons of these 2 wives and the slaves, because he has
All
us,
those babies
yeah,
and
all them
those
babies. We begin to find that the most loved by Leah are not the ones that God has chosen. Okay? So we really have to pay attention to how God is using all these the offspring of these different women in Jacob's life in order to accomplish his program. And when we get to them, I think it'll be more interesting when we get there and see. And we really won't get to it to the very end of almost the Joseph story to really figure all that out.
All the tribes.
Yeah, all the tribes and where they come from and which ones are favored, and yeah. So we won't get to that to nearly the end of the whole book. But we're seeing it unfold in different ways. Now the other thing is, this is the same kind of story. It has some parallels with Gomer, because Abraham was convinced and Sarah was convinced they were never going to have a child. And so Ishmael showed up on the scene and was there for a few years before God accomplished his promise through Sarah. And then immediately, what God is doing in that consummation with Isaac, it happens immediately because Ishmael's swept out of the scene. And then, when we're talking about that, it was the son of the slave woman they never even referred to him by name. And then that's the last you hear about him in any significant way, except where he pops up like he did earlier with his daughter and, being mentioned, but not in any, certainly not in any way where he's in conversation with God or Abraham's other relatives. So it was at Abraham's death that we find Ishmael, and it was at Esau's marriage to his daughter that we find Ishmael. But everything, that was really the only 2 significant times you hear from him. All right. Let's see. Jacob slept with Rachel, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked Laban another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was neglected, he opened her womb. Bam. Here's God again. So Jacob prefers the younger, but God is watching out for the older. She's been totally mistreated in this whole thing, right?
Well, yeah, she really has, by her father
and by her sister and by Jacob.
Yeah.
And what does God do? He steps in and he takes care of the brokenhearted. Yeah. It's a comforting thing to find this, that, you're going to have to give Leah her due because she's going to bear you children. And God does that simply because she was neglected. So whenever you feel neglected, like Hagar, there's a God who hears and there's a God who sees. And he cares.
And he's going to have the final say.
Every time.
You're going to reap what you sow.
Yeah. What's interesting about the description of Leah, all we know is she had good eyes.
Weak eyes.
Yeah. Leah.
Weak eyes.
Weak eyes? Is that what it said?
Yeah, it's weak eyes. Which I've always been taught she was probably almost blind or either very, very small. Just maybe not overly attractive, you know.
Yeah, see, this says tender eyes.
Yeah,
So I don't
weak
know.
eyes is what my translation says. but
Yeah.
it's-
What verse is it in?
oh, we just read,
20.
gave,
All right, let me look it up. 'Cause I'm really
yeah.
Curious
I
now.
was always taught that she probably wasn't
No,
very
mine says
attractive.
weak. Leah's eyes
Yeah.
were weak.
Weak, almost blind or just.
Mine
Yeah.
says
Let's see
are
what they-
soft.
I always think,
Yeah.
some people have
Tender,
lazy
weak,
eyes,
spoiled.
They don't always, some people have lazy
Yeah.
eyes and they don't open wide or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Coddled, soft, gentle, mild. Yeah. So the only descriptive quality of Leah is that she's non-threatening,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. To me, that's why the father, maybe he couldn't find anybody who wanted, I'm not defending him, you know what I'm saying? She may not have been highly desirable. That's why they were saying she could have been almost blind, you know.
Right,
And so
right.
he did all that deceiving to make sure she, it's not custom, for our firstborn to, this
Yeah.
way I'm guaranteeing she's got to be
Guaranteed
taken
she
care
gets
of.
a husband.
she's-
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when you see her, not there, but, poor baby, nobody loves me, but you keep having children. Maybe he'll love me now, maybe he'll love me now.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I mean,
she-
he had to think something of her because he
He
slept with
sleeping
her.
with, yeah, he's sleeping with her, having all them babies.
So he must
Yeah.
have thought something of her. Or maybe he got to know her and then he loved her, but maybe
Or
not
maybe-
as much.
Maybe in the back of his mind is that promise God made him at Bethel, rolling around. He's going to be the father of
All these days.
a nation that's his, countless number.
Yeah.
He's going to make sure it happened in his lifetime.
You're making it happen.
Yeah. When the Lord saw that Leah was neglected, he opened her womb, but Rachel was unable to conceive. It doesn't say why. Lord opened Leah's womb, but Rachel just barren for the time. So Leah conceived and gave birth to a son and named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has seen my affliction. Surely my husband will love me now." Yeah. So we've got this metaphor going on here now. To see is what it's a derivative for see. And so the Lord has seen my affliction. She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "The Lord heard that I am neglected and has given me a son also." So she named him Simeon. And I'm looking for a meaning to Simeon, but I don't find one in this little pop-up
Well, it
dictionary.
sounds like the
Sounds
Hebrew
like
for
a
her.
Hers, what mine says too.
Oh yeah.
So
Yep.
he saw her, then he heard her.
She conceived again. Well, she is a fertile myrtle. Conceived again and gave birth to a son. And she said, "At last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne 3 sons for him." Therefore he was named Levi. Okay, so interesting thing going on here. Notice anything that's different from the previous 2 patriarchs? Okay, one is the mother's naming these children. Okay? And before, there's been 2 other times, God named Ishmael. He told her to go back and Abraham willingly agreed. He didn't make any noise about it at all. And God named Isaac. Okay? And God named, who named Jacob and Esau?
Was that, I think that was God, huh?
I don't remember now.
Because he said something
Anyway.
about him grabbing the heel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he said that's what would happen. So
Yeah.
I think it was Rebecca that named him because of what God had told him. So here we don't have God involved in the naming at all. It's Leah naming her children, all to reflect her heart. And I thought that was interesting when I was looking through that. that
seeing, hearing, attaching, and praise.
yeah,
So by the time she was finished, she was praising him.
yeah,
And she was trying to sing, trying to be here for him. But now she's praising
yeah.
him.
So she constantly is giving God credit for what is happening in her life, but God is not involved in the naming. So, but she definitely feels the connection with God in this. And so that's significant too. Sarah did not have that. She was just maybe the opposite in a lot. And then Rebecca was more involved with Jacob getting what Jacob wanted or what she wanted for Jacob, even though God had already reassured her that Jacob was going to be the chosen one. But here we have this free relationship with God and the mother, and she's able to name her children based on how God is helping her and carrying her and giving attention to her affliction. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son and said, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore, she named him Judah. Then Leah stopped having children. So she has there's four sons now. And it's like God gives her the four, and she's through. And then we have the two concubines that will give birth, and then finally things are possible for Rachel. So let's move on. Any other comments about that?
I'm just glad I didn't live in this thing.
Oh man. I know
Been property for our folks to just do whatever we wanted.
No, golly.
yeah, different world back then for sure. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she envied her sister. "Give me sons or I will die."
She must have been a drama queen.
She said to Jacob, "Oh, she must have been, huh?" She sounded more like Sarah now. Things aren't going her way, and so she expects somebody else to do something about it. So here's the contrast. Leah is all about her relationship with God in this. She recognizes that God has looked upon her affliction, and so he's given her children. Rachel does not recognize that. She is blaming Jacob. Okay? So we hold on to this because Jacob's already proven to be pretty fertile.
It's not him.
It's not him, okay? And he's taken full advantage of his virility at this point. And all of this adds up when we get to near the end and we get to the Jabbok River. So we just want to hold on to these thoughts as we move forward. So Jacob became angry with Rachel and said, "Am I in the place of God?" He recognizes who's in control of this. "He has withheld offspring from you." And the question would have to become why? Well, we know why. Because Jacob has favored her and not given proper attention to Leah. It really is Jacob's problem because he hasn't been just and compassionate and merciful toward the wife that he really doesn't care as much for. Which, if Laban was a good guy, he wouldn't be putting his sisters through any of this. So the whole thing we have again is this twisted family dynamic that's going on.
Dysfunction's been around from
Yeah. And God's using it to produce a nation that is going to bless everybody.
It takes all our mess to make something beautiful.
Yeah. Now, if God was going to bless the nations with this, you would think, what is wrong? But that wasn't the plan, see. God was going to bless the nations through this tribal family as they come to believe and trust Him, follow Him, rely upon Him. They got a long way to go. As as we see.
Yeah, because these are the tribes.
Yeah, they're coming on one by one here.
Yeah, that they're having right now.
So here comes Rachel. Then she said, "Here is my maid Bilhah." Here we go again. "Go sleep with her, and she'll bear children for me, so that through her I too can build a family."
She must have known about Sarah.
They must have known. Had to have all heard the stories, okay? So Jacob gave her slave Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her, and she conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. Yes, he has heard me and given me a son." So she named him Dan. Now, does that really feel like she's had a son to you?
I don't get that, but they claim when they were their servants and slaves that they were theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like they really are. I mean, in the case of Sarah,
Yeah.
she, she had Ishmael, and she was doing everything she can to shove that in Sarah's face.
Right.
So how is that literally Sarah's son? It's really not. It
Right.
might have been Abraham's, but
That's right.
Sarah didn't
But it's
have any
not
part.
the
They
Lord.
didn't take that baby, it sounds like, and give it to Sarah.
Yeah.
And then she says, "Heard my voice," but Dan means judged.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
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 So I just don't see how that's,
Yeah.
Yeah. She's equating God's vindication of her as God provided a favorable judgment. But what we have is Rachel and her connection with God in this, and really, Leah, and then Rachel really doesn't have it. She didn't turn to God with her problem. She blamed it on her husband. She tries to do what Sarah did. I'll substitute, okay, and I'll have a child that way, and that happens for her. But it's not the same. Although God doesn't reject these children, and neither does anyone in the household, the relationship that's experienced with God is different, and that becomes an important part of the story as we move forward. So Rachel's slave Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Rachel said, "In my wrestlings with God, I have wrestled with my sister and won." So this is just a straight out competition that's going on here. Who can have the most sons? And she named him Naphtali, and that means to play a trick. Okay, so she feels like she's getting the upper hand by trickery. Sounds like the husband. So all this stuff. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her slave, Zilpah, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. So you can see this competition. This is the kind of thing that Mighty Python would make jokes about in a skit. I mean, really.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. So Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" And she named him Gad. All right. So let's see how many more sons we can get out of this deal before it slows down. Yeah. When Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, Leah said, "I am happy that women call me happy." So she named him Asher. Reuben went out during the wheat harvest and found some mandrakes in the field. When he brought them to his mother Leah, Rachel asked, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." Okay, so Leah, the unfavored wife, receives this gift from her son, the oldest, and then Rachel asked for some of the gift. But Leah replied to her, "Isn't it enough that you have taken my husband? Now you want to take my son's mandrakes?" "Well then," Rachel said, "he can sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." Meaning this, I'll let Jacob sleep with you tonight. So Rachel has really taken control of the situation now.
Yeah.
She's determining what Jacob's doing with his other wives. Well, then Rachel said, he can sleep with you tonight in exchange for his son's mandrake. When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So Jacob slept with her that night. All right. God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my slave to my husband. And she named him Issachar. Okay, where'd that come from? Because with this son, the slave had nothing to do with it.
He was a gigolo that night.
Yeah, he was just paid off. It seemed like you should have named him Mandrake, but it just shows up here.
Mandrakes were good.
Yeah.
Something about this family and food,
That's true. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. God has given me a good gift, Leah said. This time my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons for him. And she named him Zebulun. Later, Leah bore a daughter and named her Dinah. So now this is her 7th child, 6 sons and 1 daughter. All right, then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son, and she said, God has taken away my disgrace. She named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add another son to me. So Jacob, what's that?
Yeah.
That's a lot of kids. And ultimately Joseph becomes the favorite because he comes late in life to Jacob and to Rachel. And we'll hear the rest of that story later. Okay. So all of this is really just a narrative to help us discover Jacob's sons and the conflict that went along with it occurring, and how everyone had a hand in what was happening here willingly in order to bring about these 12 sons. And God is in the picture, but he's not directing the action. Okay? He's like the producer in the background, if you want to look at this in film terms. He's just kind of making sure the production goes the way it's supposed to go. And the players are just performing perfectly. Because his purpose in this is to establish a nation. And he's doing that. The drama that goes along with it is pretty indicative of everything that God has to deal with when he deals with us. Whenever he's about accomplishing his will and purpose, we create drama in the process. And God says, it's okay. I can deal with the drama. I've got a program working here, and we're going to stay on the program. Not that God's rigid in that, but it's the only good thing that is going to come from any of this. Because we see much later, there's problems with the sons, but God already knew that. It's kind of like Jacob grabbing the heel, and so he already knew how that was going to work and what he's trying to accomplish to bless the nations. So, verse 25, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so that I can return to my homeland. Give me my wives and my children that I have worked for, and let me go. You know how hard I have worked for you. So you would think, yeah, it's about time. It's got to be past the 7 years by now. I mean,
all these babies.
yeah. Even by 4 different women, it's got to be longer than 7 years. But Laban said to him, if I found favor with you, stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Okay, so he tried to get Rebecca to hang around when Abraham's servant went to get her. And he kind of saw through the whole thing and said, "No, I'm going back. We're going home. I'm gonna do exactly what my master said." Well, here Jacob. There's some things about Laban that you already kind of suspect from that years and years ago, and then he does the thing with the two daughters, and creates all of this. But in the process of that deception, God has been very fruitful in their lives. And so now it's time to move on back to the land that God had promised Jacob so that he can continue. He may not be thinking of it that way, but that's certainly the way God is arranging these events. Now, Laban doesn't have a lot to do with God, as we will see. He's determined by divination. Does y'all's
Mine says no.
divination? That would be similar to omens, being able to fortune tell. Skirting on the edge of witchcraft and sorcery, And so he's not a God-fearing person. But he does this saying that the Lord has blessed him. He doesn't go to the Lord to find out. He just knows that Jacob's God, the Lord, has been really good to Jacob. And so that's kind of bleeding over onto me. And because you're here, I'm catching the wake on the bank. I'm getting my part too. So he wants him to stay. He says, "Name your wages and I will pay them." So Jacob said to him, "You know how I've served you and how your herds have fared with me. For you've had very little before I came, but now your wealth has increased. The Lord has blessed you because of me, and now when will I also do something for my own family?" So he's saying, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to take care of my family. I've got a home to go to, and that's what I want to do. And Laban just keeps asking, "Well, just let me pay you to stay here." And so he says, "What should I give you?" And Jacob said, "You don't need to give me anything. If you do this one thing for me, I will continue to shepherd and keep your flock. Let me go through all your sheep today and remove every sheep that is speckled or spotted, every dark-colored sheep among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the female goats. Such will be my wages. In the future, when you come to check on my wages, my honesty will testify for me. If I have any female goats that are not speckled or spotted, or any lambs that are not black, they will be considered stolen." So this is what he's doing. I'm going to take the inferior stock. You're going to keep your superior stock. Okay? And then we're going to separate and go.
You do remember who we're talking about here.
Oh, yeah. I know. Two deceivers.
He's been deceived for 14 years.
Right.
Payback is fixing to happen.
So Laban says, "Good. Let it be as you said." So that day Laban removed the streaked and spotted male goats and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one of them that had any white on it, and every dark-colored one among the lambs, and he placed his sons in charge of them. He put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob. Jacob, meanwhile, was shepherding the rest of Laban's flock. So they separated them, and they're moving them away, and then Jacob's going to catch up. Jacob then took branches of fresh poplar, almond, and plain wood, and peeled the bark, exposing white strips on the branches. He set the peeled branches in the troughs in front of the sheep, in the water channels where the sheep came to drink. And the sheep bred when they came to drink. The flocks bred in front of the branches and bore streaked, speckled, and spotted young. Jacob separated the lambs and bade the flocks face the streaked sheep and completely dark sheep in Laban's flock. Then he set his own stock apart and didn't put them with Laban's sheep. So he's stealing sheep. Whenever the stronger of the flock was breeding, Jacob placed the branches in the troughs in full view of the flocks, and they would breed in front of the branches. As for the weaklings of the flock, he did not put the branches, so it turned out that the weak sheep belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones belonged to Jacob. And the man became very rich. He had many flocks, female and male slaves, and camels and donkeys. So we're going to stop there till we get to the rest of that. So he's been doing this, deceiving yet again. He's not stealing a birthright. He's stealing the superior animals through all sorts of deception. And God never frowns on any of this. I mean,
and I don't understand all the wood and the white and the this. And
I don't
that.
either.
And it's kind of like, is that supposed to make the sheep make better sheep? You know, it's kind of like, I'm thinking, okay, what? Because I remember studying this before and I still didn't get it then. I don't get it now. Like, why the strips of white? Other than he's making stronger herds, you know.
Yeah.
That's how he's dividing them. You know, he's just dividing them.
yeah, well, I think what it is to do is to make somehow or another when they're breeding and the shadows and all that is that the offspring are coming out and they're streaked and spotted, but they're the strongest
But they're
ones.
stronger.
Yeah, and the idea was that if they came out streaked and spotted, they were weaker and not as of much value. So he was in this thing that you can't find a lot of people that understand how it happens.
Yeah.
You know,
Or why or what?
yeah, but
to
the
go into such detail that that's how he did it.
yeah, but the point of the story is exactly what we know it to be, and that is Jacob's up to his old tricks. And he's deceiving. So it's still in his nature, rather risky, because everything that he has at this point is because Laban has allowed him to have it. And he could have just been happy with what he had, but he kind of got pushed. He got pushed by Laban saying, "No, you can work for me." "No, I don't want to work for you." And then finally he says, "I tell you what, I'll take the bad stock. I'll get them off your hands, push them back 500 miles south to where I live, and you can have the good stuff." And Laban says, "Okay." And he's thinking, this is a good deal for me. He gets to work for me for a little more time. He's good at this. And I'm going to get rid of all my bad stock, but while he's working for him, he's growing good stock. He's growing good stock and taking it and leaving the weaklings with Laban.
So how long was he left there?
This probably, you'd have to work backwards on the timeline. I don't know exactly, but years. That's another thing about these stories. Nobody's in a hurry. All this takes time. So it was another several years. When we get to his meeting with Jacob, I think we have an age, and then we can work backwards from that. But time doesn't really, it's not even of interest to the writer.
Because the next chapter still goes on about all the spotted.
Yeah, and remember
And
then they put the gods in the saddle later, and they follow them and try to make them
so
stop.
how long does goats and sheep take? I don't know anything about.
I don't know, 5-6 months, I would think.
So
The gestation
look at
can't
all
be.
the things that all the time that he was doing that, so it was a long time.
Yeah.
He was growing all them herds.
Several years.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, time takes a break when we get to these stories. The last time we really hear anything about age is only when people die. When it says, "Oh, they lived so many years and then they died." There's not a lot of concern about time other than that, which is so nice. I like that world. That would work out pretty good. So we're in the kind of the middle part of this story that is interesting, but really it just is one of those things that continues to reveal the character of Abraham's family, the family that he comes from and the family that he has produced. And none of them are on the straight and narrow. None of them are people that you would say, "I want to go hang out with them." They're selfish. They're self-centered. They'll do whatever they feel like they need to do to get what they want. And I think the reason why God is doing that is so they finally reach a point of understanding that it's not getting me anything that I want. So when Jacob finally gets to meet his brother, he's very rich. He's cheated and he's gotten really rich and he's got all this family. And when he gets to the Jabbok River, he is scared to death.
Yeah, with all that, he's still.
Yeah, has no peace. And I think God has this family and presents it in such a way to us in Scripture that allows us to see that He is willing to use, people that are self-centered, corrupt, advantageous.
There's hope for all of us because we're
Yeah. You can just add it all up into Abraham's family and be thinking.
Just Jesus' lineage alone, from Sarah to Tamar to Harley.
Yeah.
All the way down.
Yeah, you look through all the genealogies and you think. And so why does He do that? Because He never wants us to think that anything was achieved on the basis of who we are.
Good character or good
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Because we will never be good enough to accomplish God's program. And the program is to bless. And, I'll carry, when I preached a couple of weeks ago, what is the blessing that we carry? We living beyond the cross, we carry Christ as the blessing. He's the hope and He's the blessing of the world. And He spent all these thousands of years preparing a people to understand what that means, that this has nothing to do with who you are. This has everything to do with who I am with you. And it's the best life ever. And the more that the world knows that and realizes that, the more truth there is to digest and understand that this is really the life that human beings were made for.
This is where there's peace and rest and love and patience and all those good things.
All those good
but
things.
The world today doesn't want that. I mean, they are like, man, I'm not kicking against the pricks.
We are angry people.
It's an angry, mad world. And if you say anything like, was it you saying this morning? Or I don't know. Or somebody was trying to share Jesus. I don't know, man, it just happened.